Once again, it's good to see each one who are here this evening. Good to be with you throughout the day today. Appreciate the time that we've gotten to spend and get to know or reacquainted with you all this morning. And throughout the afternoon, appreciate the hospitality of the day and of the weekend, the accommodations and the meal and the encouragement and various things that you all have done for me and my family throughout this weekend. And I appreciate the opportunity to give a report here this evening of some of the things that God has been doing in primarily Newark or Licking County, and we'll talk a little bit about that here this evening. I appreciate so much the work or the support of the work that you all have provided to us and helping us to do these things. We view you as our partners in the work and appreciate you very much for the various ways that you all have helped and encouraged in the work that we've been trying to do. Certainly in the monthly support that you all have provided now over these last several years, but also in encouragement and various things that you all have done over the time. I appreciate the reading from Acts 13 and 14 as well, and the summary of that text as we just try to be as useful as any of us can as we try to go about doing God's work. And so tonight, this is actually the first time I think I've been asked to give a report on at least my local work over the years that I've been supported in various places. I have given a report when I've come back from some overseas work, and of course send monthly printed reports, but I think this is the first time that I've been asked to give a report on the local work. So excited about that, and hopefully it'll be some help to you as you understand as our partners in this work of some of the things that have been going on. All right. Do you have the PowerPoint up? All right. We'll let him get that together for just a moment. All right. I wanted to begin by just kind of introducing my family and I. Some of you all have gotten to know us a little bit today, but just a little bit of background on us and myself. I'm from Fly, Ohio, and if you ask me where Fly, Ohio is, I'm going to have to pull up a map because probably whatever I'm going to describe that's close to you probably won't know either. But it's along the Ohio River and about an hour from wherever you might like to go, and still that you probably haven't heard of. But nice place to grow up, and lots of good brethren in the area there. I've preached in a full-time capacity since 2008, and then kind of regular in 2007 as well. And so now I guess about 19 years of preaching in some capacity regularly. We've worked with 4 different congregations, and they've all been in the Ohio, West Virginia area. Kind of northeastern Ohio and southeastern Ohio, and then in West Virginia across the river from where I grew up pretty well. Now, of course, in Licking County. I'll talk a little bit more about that or really focus on that as we go along as well. We've been there since 2019. I'm married to, my wife's name is Ashley. She's from Charleston, West Virginia. We've been married since 2008, so 18 years. And she has been a worker at home. She has been homeschooling our 3 children, along with lots of other things, and certainly helping in the work and the Bible studies that we are engaged in, either together or that she's involved with on her own, and pretty much whatever we do online, as we'll talk a little bit about as well. She pretty much takes care of all of those things. I give her whatever it is, she'll go and put it on and make it happen, and various things of that nature, or some of the printing that we do and various things along that way. We have 3 children. Alice is our oldest. She's 14. She's about to enter the first year of high school. She's involved a lot with crochet, and she's been learning to ice skate. She's about finished with that. She was baptized, I guess now it's been about 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago, in 2024. Michael's 12. He's about to enter 7th grade. He loves soccer, and he's the one I can grab and go and play just about whatever sport we want to. And so we have a lot of fun in that way. He was baptized in 2025, so last year. Rachel, 7. She's about to enter 3rd grade, and she enjoys as well. She's been learning to ice skate as well, and things like riding her bike, and she plays a lot with her dolls and loves her guinea pigs and such. And so that's just a little bit about my family in a nutshell. So maybe to put some faces with the names and such. As we think more about the work that we've been involved in, I tried to put a map up there that shows you Licking County. That's the red outline there, but also to give you a little bit of context in how it sits relative to Columbus. Licking County is kind of the edge, I believe, of what's considered the Columbus metro area. Newark is the county seat of Licking County. And when you think about the amount of work that there is to do in the area, Newark has a population of about 51,000 people. I think it's just slightly over that. The town right next to us is Heath, and in fact, if you didn't know they were two separate towns, if somebody hadn't told you, you wouldn't know. You pretty much run one right into the other. Heath has about 10,000 people, so just right there, we've got about 62,000 people. Licking County itself has about 186,000 last time that I saw. And again, the Columbus metro, you're looking at about 2 million people, or maybe slightly more than that now. There are somebody was asking me earlier about industry. There are some industries in Newark. Heath Boeing is one of the ones that maybe y'all would know. Owens Corning's another one. But a lot of times folks will commute over to Columbus as well. And I'm sure, like most places, there's a large mix religiously. There's certainly a lot that we have in the area of just not affiliated in any kind of way, don't really believe in anything as it relates to God and organized religion and so forth. But certainly we've got the whole gamut, if you will, of like the denominational churches and a lot of non-denominational churches that have popped up, a lot of community-type churches, Catholic as well. But one of the things that I've also noticed when we moved up there, I mean, where I'm from, there's a lot of churches of Christ, maybe kind of similar to this area, except take the population and shrink it down a lot more as well, and the size of the congregation shrink it down. But there's a lot of churches of Christ from where I grew up in southeastern Ohio. And a lot of them would be congregations that we might fellowship with, worship with, and so forth. But then maybe there were some institutional type churches there. But when I moved up to this area, one of the things that really stuck out to me, that there's a lot of places in Licking County and really in Columbus as a whole, that's not just you run into institutional churches, but there's a lot of instrumental churches of Christ in the area. And so that was a little bit different for me to be exposed to. In fact, just kind of thinking off the top of my head here, but I would say in the Newark and Heath area alone, there are probably at least 3 churches of Christ, maybe 4 that are instrumental. There's a lot of homelessness. I mean, probably, I'm sure not as much as some of the get into downtown Columbus and such, but there's certainly a large homeless struggle that's going on in Newark, and so I've had opportunity to try to work with some of those as well. Certainly a lot of addiction that I run into as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. There's been a door that's opened in that particular area that I've been encouraged by. As far as congregations, non-institutional, non-instrumental congregations, just to kind of give some context for the work and in relation to the population and so forth. Of course, the congregation that I work with is in Newark. and I'll talk a little bit more about that congregation here in just a little while. There's also a congregation that assembles kind of up at the very tip of Licking County as well, in a town called Utica. There's another congregation I don't really know that much about, and there's not really many opportunities to go and find out about, that I'm told is a smaller congregation, but there's just not been a lot of opportunity with that. As it relates to the congregation that I work with, the picture on the right, I guess, that's we own and meet in the building that you see there. I think it's an older, maybe online picture. There may have been a little bit of updating since then. Inside, this is a fairly recent assembly time that we've had to be together, and so you can. We had some visitors, we had some of our own members out, but there's at least a little bit of a visual that you can have for that. I've been working with the congregation there since November of 2019. I'll kind of hit back on that date a little bit more as we go along. When I came to work with the congregation there, one of the things that they really wanted me to do, they didn't want me to necessarily be tied to the pulpit, though I do share in a lot of the teaching. But they wanted me to be able to go out and have Bible studies and share the gospel with folks. So there has been a lot of participation from the various members of the congregation in preaching and teaching as they try to help me in the work that we do. If you want just kind of some general numbers, think about somewhere, I think over the last quarter, maybe 66 was the number that I came up with of kind of an average Sunday morning attendance. But that's not even completely fair. We kind of fluctuate, as most congregations do, I suppose, based on who's in town and who's sick and various things. Somewhere between 60 or 80 if you walked into a typical Sunday morning gathering. I think actually that gathering was a little bit larger than that. But typically that's fairly average. Sunday evening we typically have about 45, and Wednesday evening about 42 have been some of the recent numbers that I've seen. The membership itself, there's a great range. Really, for the size of congregation we are, there's really a good mix in the congregation. We have from under a year old to almost 90, just to kind of get a general range. We've got a lot of families, a good number of them, again, at least relative to our size. We're blessed with that. We're able to have 3 children's classes. We've got some unmarried adults as well. We've got a couple of multi-generational families as well in the congregation. Of course, some retirees, some elderly, some singles, some divorced. So there's really a pretty strong mix of just demographics, I guess you would, for the congregation itself. Currently, however, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go along, currently there are no elders and deacons. So kind of more into some of the work that has been going on. I'm a bad news first kind of guy. If you have there's good news and bad news, I'd rather you give me the bad news first, so I'll do that as we go through with this. So here are some of the struggles that we've had. I wish we could say, it's all been this great stuff that's been going on, but there have been a lot of struggles over these almost 7 years now. Of course, we got to start with, when I mentioned I started in November of 2019, well, about 4.5 months later, we know what changed the world. And so that presented its own challenges, just as from the context of just getting started in the work. November, December, there's a lot of family stuff, a lot of holiday things going on. So then really you start getting your feet wet in January and February, and then the world changes in March. Certainly it challenged the congregation. We had some gains and some losses during that time. I would say that we got through COVID pretty well. At least when I hear of some of the other struggles that some brethren have faced, I think we fared fairly well through it, though there were certainly some things that should have been navigated better. I would imagine that any group would look back and pretty much all of them would say there are some things we could have done better. There's been even some public repentance about some things. we did have elders and deacons during this time, so I think that was a big help, of course, during that time. One of the other setbacks that we had that continues to impact us is the loss of the eldership that we experienced. I think that was about early of 2022. We still have both of the men who were serving as elders. They are still both active in the work. They are great men. But one of them needed to step down based on some family situations that had happened. And so we lost our eldership. Of course, the deacons, we no longer had them either. And really, for the congregation, the eldership really hadn't been in place for all that long. So it was still fairly new, even from that standpoint. I want to say maybe they had served for maybe about 3 years or something like that before they stepped down or before I got there. I can't really remember on that. They were already in place when I got there. So certainly that's presented challenges as it relates to just how we go about doing the work. I mean, we're fortunately, the congregation is very united. The congregation is, I would say, very loving and working together, but anybody that's been in a men's business meeting will probably know, even when you have a great group of guys that get along and work well together, that for some reason you don't get a lot done, or at least not as much as anybody wants to. And so that's certainly been a challenge to be able to get things done efficiently on a congregational level over these past about 4 years. We also had a setback if there was a family that was very instrumental, I would say, in the congregation there, and really even instrumental in our choosing to move there. And they had chose to move to another location, kind of in another part of Columbus that would just put them a little bit further from us. And so they joined with another congregation closer to the area, but that was a fairly substantial loss for us about 2.5 years ago. We also lost a family during COVID. There were a few losses during COVID, but this one in particular, that this was a man who had served as one of our deacons. And they didn't join another congregation, they just fell away. And so that was a difficult situation for at least several in the congregation. I really didn't know him very well. Again, we just got there shortly before COVID, and we didn't see them a lot through that period of time, if I remember correctly. One of the larger losses and setbacks for us, at least on a personal level, maybe less on a congregational level, we had been given opportunity to work with a family that lived in another part of Columbus, about 50 minutes or so away from us. I worked with them probably for at least 2 years, if not more than that, studying with them regularly, driving out to their place, spending hours and so forth. Our families got close. They went through some difficult times with the congregation that they had gotten connected with after they were baptized, and became very discouraged about some of the things that had been going on. They eventually then came and joined the congregation that I work with in West End, in Newark. And that family, just to give you a little bit of context, not only the original couple, they had me study with their son, and he was baptized, or one of their sons, he was baptized. They would lead me to other people, and there were 3 other people who were baptized in connection with them. They were all outside of our kind of where people would normally come and worship with us, but we were studying with them and trying to help them grow. And there was even hope that maybe we could use them as a springboard to help maybe start a congregation in the area that they lived in, where there, I believe, is a congregation that's needed. But then some things were happening behind the scenes we didn't even recognize. And again, we were working very closely with them, and they announced to us one day about 2 years ago that they were just walking away. They've changed their minds on some things. They want nothing to do with the church. And not only that, but they became very hostile. And they used the podcast that they wanted me to help them start when they were going really well, and now they've been using it to try to tear things down. And those others, they've negatively influenced as well. So that was a challenging situation that we've been through. And then also just several others have fallen away. And we could tell stories about each one of those. And if you've worked with folks and you've tried to help them come to the Lord, and you've poured time and effort and care into them, you know that each one of those has its own special sting, I guess you would say. We've seen the parable of the sower play out time and time again in various ways. So that's some of the bad news. And now we can move on. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been positive. I mean, and really even some of those things that we've talked about, I've been trying to gain a greater appreciation that even though those things haven't had the ending that I wished, at least at this point, to still be appreciative of God gave us that opportunity to work with those people over a period of time, and seeds have been planted, love has been shown, and they will do what they will with it. But certainly there have been some gains that still remain. We've gained some families that have moved into the area or that have placed membership with us in some other capacity. We've baptized several or seen several baptized. There's some who are on the screen here, including the one I hope to write about here in just in this next report on the kind of the top left as I'm looking at it. Yeah, on the top left. He was just baptized a week or two ago. And it's kind of an interesting story as well, as that was someone who really wasn't interested for a while. I had the opportunity, I baptized both of his parents years back, and he sat in on some Bible studies and stuff, but he was very respectful, but just wasn't interested at the time. And now he's really gotten engaged and seems to be doing really well. So we're encouraged by that. Some are still with us, certainly, who have been baptized. Others have fallen away or weakened. I think one of the other gains that we could talk about is just the evangelistic efforts, regardless of whatever happens. And one of the things, as we talk about some of the different ways we try to go about sharing the gospel, is try to encourage the folks who come out and help us. Look, it doesn't matter what the result is. I'm going to be able to at least stand a better shot at trying to help somebody if I'm out versus if I'm just sitting in my house. And so we've been trying to make some various efforts to try to get out. I'm told that the congregation was really not involved in many efforts, or really they were virtually non-existent. So that is how it was described to me. And now we have several efforts to try to share the gospel. And I think there's a culture that's building regarding that as well. Not that nobody was ever trying to say anything I don't want to leave that impression, but at least congregational efforts. We've went from about 43 members. As I look back on some of the records, we went from about 43 members, and God has now blessed us. We're at about 65 over these several years, and that's even after the various losses that we've talked about. So God's blessed us in those regards. There's been, again, significant gains in the congregational involvement. I think that would go in this list as well. How the congregation has just really gotten involved with one another. That's been a big point of emphasis, as we'll talk about a little bit as well. They seem to have a deep love for each other. There's been many opportunities for teaching that have developed for the men. We try to give lots of opportunities for teaching and preaching among the various members of the congregation, and they've responded to that and I think have grown through that. We're trying to develop potential elders and deacons. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then it also appears that the man who had been working with the congregation before me, and he moved away, and now I believe he's trying to move back. And so he can help in some of the work as well, and some of the teaching work. He's, I believe, a retired either school teacher or principal. And so he's going to be able to help share in some of the teaching work. There have been some certain areas that we've been trying to really emphasize over the time that we've been there. Certainly evangelism, I'll talk a little bit more about that, and discipleship, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But one of the things that we've been trying to do is just really the one another passages and trying to really be God's family. We had a quarter where we just really emphasized the concept of being God's family and of course other things. It wasn't just preaching a class on it, but other opportunities and groups and different things that we've been trying to do to get everybody involved and recognizing their responsibilities toward one another. We've also been trying to emphasize, especially recently, leadership development. It's easy to say, we need elders, and we do. But then if we just sit back and wait for elders to hopefully one day be there, I've seen that happen, it seems like, too often. We're trying to be more proactive in that, having studies and discussions, and you'll see that in the reports as we're trying to do that about once a month. And have these discussions around biblical leadership. In addition to giving men opportunities for development and teaching and evangelism and mentoring and so forth that helps people to put those things into practice. As far as some of our evangelistic efforts, there's certainly a lot of my time that's involved in trying to have personal Bible studies, and I try to reflect that in the reports that we send. In fact, not all in folks who have not obeyed the gospel, but also in studying with folks who have obeyed the gospel. Usually in a given time, there's somewhere between about 20 and 30 people we're trying to work with in some capacity. And again, several of those are folks who have not obeyed the gospel. And they're all over the map as far as their background and various things. I tend to use an approach that I call my ladder. If you want more information about that, I can share that with you sometime. Sometimes it takes a long time to work with folks. Many of them simply don't know much about the Scriptures. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but many have not known very much as it relates to what the Bible teaches. And so some of these efforts are months long. There's one lady I've been working with for 2 years, and it's been very slow progress, but I believe there has been progress in trying to help her come to the understanding she needs to have. One of the things that have been most effective for us, this is probably should be no surprise, are just personal contacts and networking. Just keep asking the question to people that you know. Would you like to study the Bible? Do you study the Bible? What do you, what's your religious background? Just get conversations going. Sometimes as we're out at studying the Bible with somebody at a Wendy's, and there's somebody else sitting across the way and hears us, and we can have a conversation with him, maybe exchange phone numbers or whatever. I've actually found it kind of helpful not to give out a business card, but hey, can I text you my number? And in doing that, I have theirs. But also, just being able to network with folks. There was just one of the situations that we've been involved with, and one of the opportunities that have come up recently. There was a lady who had just walked in off the street. She was baptized into Christ. Now, unfortunately, that has not ended very well so far. She seems like disassociated herself from us. But in the meantime, while she was connected with us and trying to find other people for me to study the Bible with, she led me to a guy who was in a recovery program. And I had an opportunity to go into his house, or at least in the house that he was allowed to live in, and sit down and study the Bible with him. And then he got me connected with 2 other guys. And then one of those guys got me into another house inside of that facility, which is kind of like ground zero for that program. And there's all the time guys coming in and out of that house. And I'm getting to study with the resident manager there. So that hopefully keeps my foot in the door, at least for a little while. And then there have been at least 2 others that I've studied with in that house now. And before I left to come down here, there were 2 other guys who said they would like to study as well. So we've had those opportunities. We've, of course, encouraged the members to use their contacts as well to see who they might know who would like to study the Bible. We've been mailing to people who move into our area. That one's not been super effective, but is something that we are involved with. We have had these booths, as you see on the screen, where we set up at whether the Strawberry Festival or there's a couple of fairs that we do pretty much every year. And we every year find folks who are interested in studying the Bible. Whether or not they follow through or not is on them. But we try to send them what they've requested, try to set up Bible studies as we're given the opportunity. We've at least had a couple of baptisms in connection with that. And then those folks have tried to help take us to some other folks as well. I've had the opportunity to get involved with studying the Bible and with some folks through when they were in prison or in jail, and sometimes those folks, that one would lead me to another as well. I'm not registered with any organization or anything like that to get my foot in the door, but they just kind of led me one to another. Same in the recovery work as well. I'm sure there's more I could talk about regarding that, but time's getting away and I need to move on. When you think about, all right, there's a lot of work that goes into trying to help somebody learn the gospel. But that's, once they're baptized, is just when it begins. And I think the elders here could attest to that, and anybody here, not only from our own lives and perspective, but also if we try to work with other folks, that it takes a lot of work to then continue to help them grow and be established and rooted in the faith and help them take the next steps and help them work through struggles. There are times we're studying with folks and they're new to the faith, and this is a whole worldview change. I mean, yes, there's sometimes folks who, are just, maybe there's some smaller areas that they've needed to change their thinking about, but some have come from a completely different worldview, and they have no idea, for example, of what's a marriage relationship supposed to look like? What does just normal, that's probably not the right way to say it, but what does just living this every day look like? And so there's been a lot of struggles that to try to help people through. I've also been trying to focus a lot with the congregation, especially those who have been Christians for quite some time, trying to teach them how to work with other people, how to try to teach the gospel to other people. The kingdom of God needs laborers, and I believe we need to all be as equipped as we can to be able to go out and share the gospel with others. That's one of the works of the evangelists, one of the works of the elders, it's one of the work of teachers, Ephesians chapter 4, to equip the saints for the work of ministry. Right now we're involved in kind of a couple of quarter project of trying to help do exactly that, of trying to teach some skills of what are some things that we need in order to be equipped to go and just be able to help lead others to Christ or help others grow in the Lord. And we want to follow that up with some other things to try to, more of the what is involved in being taught. Of course, I'm involved in the congregational teaching. I've already mentioned that. Usually I preach a couple of times a month. I teach on Sunday morning Bible class. I usually am teaching somewhere on Wednesday night. In one of the classes, sometimes we have multiple classes, and so we can split up into smaller groups. There's some other work we've been involved with as well, in addition to just kind of the local work in Licking County and the surrounding area. I've had the opportunity now to go over to Sierra Leone in West Africa a couple of times. That was in 2022 and 2023, so just on the heels of COVID, so that made the first trip a bit interesting. It was actually my first time in a commercial airplane. And my first time in an airport and such. So that was interesting as well. Some were certainly baptized, but really the primary work when we go over or when we have gone over is to try to build up those who are teaching others. Try to pour into them so they can go and share that with others. I've had opportunities, of course, with some gospel meetings. I've done some workshop type of things as well, and discipleship and evangelism and such. And then my wife and I are trying to build a website called godsaidso.com. There's It's a shell of what we want it to be at this point, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment as well. But that's some things that we've been trying to do in addition to some of the more local work. All right, one more thing, and then we'll move to the conclusion. As I kind of think about the path forward and some of the things that we're really trying to, or at least hoping and praying that we might be able to try to accomplish in the near future. Of course, there's always uncertainty. There's always ups and downs. There's always things that come up that you couldn't predict, and all sorts of things. And so ups and downs are expected in the work. We are hoping to move toward an eldership. A couple of days ago, I had planned to say that I thought that was really looking good by the end of the year. There's something that's changed. I'm not sure if the end of the year, if it's going to happen by that point or not. We'll see. Certainly, we'd ask and covet your prayers in that regard, and all of these things as it relates to the work. But certainly, whether it's by the end of the year or not, I believe we're moving the right direction. I believe that there are a few good men who are considering that work, who would, if the congregation selected them, who hopefully one day will be able to serve. And so I think we're moving the right direction. And I think certainly to be able to appoint deacons after that, I believe, would be a strong possibility as well. I mentioned that man who was trying to move back to the area. I think as he moves back, hopefully he'll be able to get more and more involved in the teaching work, and maybe be able to help me be able to accomplish some of the other things I'd like to do as well. I'm hoping to become even more involved in evangelistic work in the area. I mean, we've been trying to do as much as we can, but I especially want to go deeper in some online opportunities in the area. We've kind of developed a shell of a website to be able to use just directly to reach out to the community, try to provide that kind of entry point for people and their becoming familiar with us. I think sometimes, when we read in the book of Acts, you could go in the marketplace, you could discuss ideas and so forth. I think we don't have that as much in a physical sense today as they might have in the New Testament. But I think our marketplace, a lot of times where people discuss things and look for ideas, is really a lot of times digitally. And so I'd like to really focus on that if I get some more opportunity, and especially as it relates to time. But that's certainly something that's on the radar that we would like to see accomplished. There are some young men that we have who I believe have some ability to preach. We're trying to help them kind of come along in their development as well, and so I hope to work more with them. I mentioned the website that my wife and I have that's separate from the church there. We've got a lot of plans for that as well, to put resources of Bible studies, written, video, and so forth, with the goal of hopefully people can just take them and go share them with other people, and different kinds of resources, maybe some podcasts, maybe some training, different things that we have in mind if we can continue to build that. We want to not only hope to one day soon appoint elders, but also I think if we can do that, we want to encourage those shepherds to pretty quickly start looking for others that they can invest in, so that we don't have to have these gaps any longer of times without leadership, without that eldership in place. And so we want not only a pipeline of leaders in that regard, but people who can teach other people as well. And perhaps that there might be opportunities to see the kingdom of God spread into other areas as well. There's a lot of work that needs done in the Columbus metro area as a whole even. And so there's lots of opportunities. And so these are just some things that are on my mind looking forward. We'll see what opportunities God opens. Sometimes you have a plan and God opens a different door, and so you go with whatever door God opens. But those are just some of the things that have kind of been on our mind as we've thought about the work moving forward. We'll close there. Certainly appreciate your interest in the work, appreciate your support of the work. There's been a lot of ups and downs over these last 6.5, 7 years that we've been there. But despite the challenges and the discouragement, I think we've seen God be at work among people in Licking County and beyond, and we're thankful to Him for what all He has done. We appreciate certainly your partnership in the gospel that helps make those efforts possible. And certainly want you to be encouraged of how you share not only in the work that we're involved with, but other men that you support as well in the gospel. And may God get all the glory and all the honor and all the praise that He's due in the work that's done. And may He continue to be with this congregation, that you might continue to be united in the faith, that you might continue to be shepherded by the elders here, that you will continue to be zealous in the work of spreading the gospel of the kingdom, both here in this area and to people that you know, and throughout the world as you have opportunity. Appreciate again so much the opportunity to be here this weekend, and your help and your fellowship and your encouragement in the work that we're involved with. This evening, we haven't said much as it relates to the gospel message itself, but we need to recognize, why is all of this important? Because the gospel needs to go wherever sin goes. Sometimes we sing that song, I trust you all too, do as well, that where sin is gone must go His grace. The gospel is for all. This evening, if you haven't yet come to the Lord, you haven't experienced His grace that He's provided through Christ. And we want to invite you to take advantage of the opportunity that He gives. And if you'll hear His word, if you'll believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, if you'll repent of your sins and confess your faith in Him and be baptized for the forgiveness of your sins, you can experience that transforming, soul-saving grace. Won't you do that this evening? Maybe you've done that and you've wandered away. Come back to Him while you have the opportunity. We invite you, we can help you in some way, to come and have a seat on the front while we stand and while we sing.